Time now for Football Friday, 4 o'clock football. John McMullen, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles Insider. We'll start with this, the fact that you and I are trying to determine who's to blame. Is it Andre Dillard or is it Kessler? Who's at fault, John McMullen, for Kessler getting lit up last night? Where do you lay the blame, Johnny Mac?
Well, the coach laid the blame on the quarterback, so I think it stops there. I think it's punctuated at that point. And once you see the protection and understand Andre Dillard did what he was supposed to do, and they're bringing 6 and you only have 5 to block, then it's on the quarterback. So we talk a lot about who's responsible for sacks and things like that. More often than not, I think most fans don't realize how much the quarterback has in that, how much responsibility he has, whether it's a veteran quarterback, young quarterback. You have to know the protection. You have to know where it's sliding. And if somebody's coming from the opposite end, well, then you got to get to the hot route. That's what Cody Kessler was supposed to do. He didn't even really look to the left side, and he kind of paid for it with a concussion. And the coach basically outing him, which you don't see often in this league.
Yeah, that is kind of rare. Usually a coach will stand up for his guy, but in that case, and I saw this tweet from Jeff Schwartz, a guy that played in the league, and, I call him like an alternate to Brian Baldinger, right? I played offensive line, so I'm going to see it differently than anybody else, and he throws out another empty pass protection tutorial. Most likely hadn't seen a cross dog versus empty protection in all of camp. QB is hot off 1 to the front side. LT, great job here. LG needs to see it. Unfortunately, QB got injured, but the ball needs to be gone. All right, what does that mean, John?
Yeah, well, it means the quarterback's got to understand there's an unblocked blitzer coming, and he's got that. When that happens, and someone's coming that's not accounted for, you got to get rid of the football. That's a hot route. That's exactly what you have to do. As a quarterback, you have to recognize it, get the ball out quickly. Generally, you throw right behind it. And that's what was supposed to happen. But, you still have to know the protections. And that's where Doug kind of confirmed Schwartz's take on things, because Ross Tucker was doing the game and he had the opposite take.
Right.
And I think that's the natural assumption. When you have a veteran quarterback and you have a rookie offensive lineman, you tend to default to, well, the rookie probably made the mistake. And more often than not, you're probably right if you take that tack. In this case, Andre did what he was supposed to do, and the quarterback didn't.
John McMullen's with us. Football at 4, and Eagles win over the Jaguars last night, plus with Cody Kessler going out. Then, of course, that means Clayton Thorson comes in a heck of a lot earlier than he thought, and your lead, listen, John, I've praised you before. I'll praise you again. Nice, short, sweet, succinct, and really sums it all up. Maybe the best way to learn how to swim is to be thrown into the deep end of the pool. See, now it's 2019. You can't do that to a kid anymore. But this is a great lead, because you're essentially saying, hey, Clayton Thorson was terrible last week, and last night it's like, okay, have at it.
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate it. I mean, he looked like a very flawed NFL prospect last night. He didn't even look like that against Tennessee the week prior. So it was a significant step forward. I kind of said you can see what confidence does, just even a little bit of confidence, a little bit of self-assuredness. You throw the ball with some conviction, better things are going to happen. Now, while I say that, you also have to realize, and this is bad in a preseason environment, you could tell Doug scaled things back dramatically and in the preseason just to get through a game. And from an offensive perspective, and you don't want to be doing that. You really don't. You really don't want to have to do that. So I look at that game as a whole. I don't know if people are excited about it. You probably engage with textures and all that. I got nothing from that game from an offensive perspective. I mean, the entire offense didn't play, the starting offense, with the exception of the running backs. And then they scaled it back so much when they were forced to go to Thorson. It was really just, let's get the heck out of here.
So, John, I mean, that goes back to our preseason conversation last week, just our thoughts on it as a whole, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today, at least just yet. So, I'm just going to ask you right off the bat, black and white, do they need to sign someone? Because we all know the names that are being tossed around.
Yeah, I think they need to sign someone to get through practices, and it depends how quickly Cody Kessler gets through concussion protocol as well. I mean, if he can clear it and he can be out there and practicing against the Ravens by Monday, which is very unlikely, then I would say, no, it's not really a necessity. But you need somebody just to take reps in practice and in the third preseason game, because it's pretty evident you're not going to see a lot of Carson Wentz. And if anything, this just tilts things more in that direction. So you need an arm, but that's all you need. You need a camp arm to get through this nonsense, to be honest. Anybody talking about a veteran quarterback, again, you have to understand the NFL system. If you're a vested veteran, and a vested veteran means you've got 4 years experience, that means if you're on the week one roster, your entire year's salary is guaranteed. So when you talk about a veteran quarterback potentially coming in and Nate Sudfeld being out maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, absolute worst case scenario, 4 weeks, you want to guarantee a third string quarterback his entire salary because he's a veteran. So if you do bring in a veteran, what you're essentially saying is you don't believe in Nate Sudfeld. That has nothing to do with Cody Kessler. And the Eagles do believe in Nate Sudfeld.
So what happens like week one? What does the depth chart look like? Because Carson's going to go, knock on wood, and then you have Sudfeld who's out. Kessler, I mean, how long is he going to be probably ready to go as a third stringer or a backup?
I wouldn't imagine Cody Kessler's going to be in concussion protocol through week one.
Yeah.
He'll be ready to go. It's not that serious. You never know with concussions. I mean, there have been really, really bad ones where guys have been on the shelf longer than that. But it certainly didn't look like it. I mean, he wanted to stay in the game, number one. He didn't even want to come out. So I find it very hard to believe it's going to be more than really a couple days. Maybe he misses the third preseason game against the Ravens. And, again, you need a camp arm. So maybe Luis Perez, who was here before they signed Cody Kessler, he would be a logical candidate for that, somebody of that nature. But a veteran guy, again, vested, he's guaranteed his whole salary if he's here week one. And you could say all you want, well, it's about winning the Super Bowl. That could be important. NFL teams don't do that for third-string quarterbacks. They're not going to guarantee a full 17 weeks of salary, which would probably be pretty significant if you're talking about a Josh McCown, talking him out of retirement. Colin Kaepernick, name people love to throw around, would be even more than that. They're not going to do that for 2 weeks of an insurance policy. That's just dumb. That's what dumb teams do.
I love it. I just want to give him a standing ovation. But, John, so how does it impact training camp? Like, how does it impact the next 2 weeks? Doug, at his presser after the game last night, he said, between all of my time playing in the league and now coaching, I've never seen quarterbacks go down like this in the preseason, multiple on the same team, backups, that is. So does it hinder any type of potential progress that Doug wants to hopefully make over the next couple weeks?
I think it hinders a little bit with the second and third team. And obviously, as I said, when you're looking at that game last night, they scaled things back to such a dramatic degree. You really can't evaluate people in the offense probably like you'd like to. And they ran the ball. I mean, if you want to look for a silver lining, the final drive, they ran it right down Jacksonville's throat. Boston Scott, Donnell Pumphrey. These are obviously third-string offense players, but the offensive line, the backup offensive line was dominant, and they got to show something they typically don't show because, let's face it, Doug likes to throw the ball when he has a quarterback capable of throwing the ball. So it could be a silver lining from getting the running game ramped up a little bit. But even that, from that perspective, there's no starters out there. So, I mean, what do you take from it?
Well, John, the head coach, in a sense, is a starter, right? He'll play a pivotal role in Week 1, and I guess we had Grayson on for his Grayson's grades earlier, and that was like a highlight that stood out to him. That Doug not only challenged calls last night, but got the challenges right. What was your take on that?
A lot of coaches are trying to just throw the flag to see how they're going to handle it, and that's more of a practice thing, and that's what preseason football is about. So kind of get a feel for offensive and defensive pass interference and what they will call, what they won't call, what they will overturn, what they won't overturn. So he has said that. I mean, if there was going to be a questionable call, they were going to throw the flag just to see what happened. So I don't think it's necessarily anything more than preparing for the regular season, as it should be. I don't think it's a check mark in his column or a negative. He's just trying to feel out how it's going to be, and I think every coach in this league is the same way.
John, I remember this time last summer, I was asking you questions regarding the abundant amount of flags that were being thrown during these games and if it would potentially carry over into the regular season, and it ended up not being as extreme as it was during the preseason games. But, for our listeners out there, I think last night shed a light on a lot of fans on the new rule, the challenge rule, and to get the obvious calls accurate. So can you kind of just take a step back for the listeners and just explain exactly what that new challenge rule is and how you see it impacting games?
Well, I think it's a terrible rule, number one. I think they overreacted, very similar to the Aaron Rodgers play a couple of years ago when he got drove into the turf by Anthony Barr. You can't overreact to one instance, and this was obviously in relation to the NFC Championship game, which was a big spot to blow a call. Don't get me wrong, and it was a terrible non-call. However, if you watch a lot of NFL games, and this is what I ask every other media person I see, every other fan that wants to talk about it, how many of those egregious calls do you see in an NFL game, even an NFL season? There's not a whole heck of a lot. So to open up this Pandora's box just for one play, I think is a mistake, number one. But from the perspective of OPI and DPI, yeah, you can challenge it now, even when it's not called on the field. I don't like it personally. I think it's a very, very difficult call. It's a judgment call, and I think you're going to see a lot of people upset. But while I say that, if they call, and I think Mike Lombardi was talking about this today, and I talked about it a couple weeks ago, because the refs, every year they brief us on the change of rules and the points of emphasis. And if they call backside holding, like they said they were going to call, people are going to be more upset by that. They are going to be up in arms by that. So to give you an example, say you have a big Miles Sanders run off left tackle, Jason Peters, 40, 50-yard run, and Lane Johnson on the other side, they call it a lobster block. Not even involved in the play. But if you get your arms around incorrectly outside the framework of the body, even though it has nothing to do with the play, they're going to call holding. That's what they say they're going to do. And they've done it in the preseason. And my only hope is, as you said, Ryan, they get to the regular season and they go back to normal. Because that is going to be a bigger problem than even pass interference and the new rule from that perspective.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's similar to last year and this, dies down and they get it right and it's sort of like business as usual. And when the times come in big games or big moments, they can go to that new rule. Last week, John, I asked you how many spots realistically are up for grabs on this Eagles team. And I think you said maybe 8 or 9. You maybe said 45, 46. Correct me if I'm wrong. That range we're locked in. So another preseason game in the books. How many spots are open today?
Yeah, not a lot. And again, you didn't learn anything from an offensive perspective. Maybe There's a couple guys. Nate Herbig is it's an undrafted guy. Pretty clear to me this team wants somebody to take Stefan Wisniewski's job. Maybe it's Nate Herbig. Deja Hall, the defensive end, and this is another thing I tweeted, and we've talked far too much about the relevancy of preseason football. I'll agree with you guys there. It's not relevant, certainly from the starters. The perspective that Doug doesn't play them should give you a pretty good indication it doesn't matter to those guys. Malcolm Jenkins, Brandon Graham, they play because they wanted to play, and they don't miss practice. Those are guys who are just kind of different, and they want to be out there. But from a whole, it just doesn't matter. But Deja Hall has been so dominant. If he doesn't make the final 53, that's the death knell of preseason football. Because then it means absolutely nothing. And when we started this process, now Joe Osman was still healthy. Deshaun was not projected to make this team. So there's a guy who's done everything he can do to stand out, has dominated when he's gotten the opportunity against backup players. If the Eagles don't keep him, again, that tells you everything you need to know.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles Insiders. We recap the Eagles and Jaguars. Birds win last night in preseason. 2 in the books. Thank God. Now 2 more still to go. Ravens game coming up next. But, John, you're kind of hitting your points, too, in your column of your Bulls and Bears when you do the stock market. That's your McMullenism to Grayson's grades, right? Your pluses and minuses. You just touched on a guy that, for the life of me, I can't figure out why the Eagles, for me, keep setting this guy up to fail. Like, Wisniewski is a capable offensive lineman, and yet they never seem to talk about him in the Super Bowl season, or, they always seem to think like, yeah, but, and now they throw him at center last night, and he was bad.
Yeah, he was, and it's weird because he started a lot of games in this league as a center. Before he got here, he was in Oakland and Jacksonville for a long time, and he was a starting center. I think he started over 60 NFL games at center. And he's been having difficulty throughout camp as well, just to practice with the shotgun snap. And it's interesting because Nate Herbig, the undrafted kid from Stanford, never played center before in his life. Before the first maintenance day, they gave Jason Kelsey off this summer. And they said, Nate, go in there at center. And he's already better at a shotgun snap, or a little bit more consistent. It's certainly weird. But as far as Wiz goes, I mean, Jeff Stoutland likes athletic guys, and he's not athletic. And that's why if you go back to that Super Bowl season, they almost held their nose. They tried Isaac Seumalo. He wasn't ready.
Right.
Then people kind of forget they went to Chance Warmack, who was with Jeff Stoutland at Alabama, and then he failed. And then they kind of, as I said, held their nose and put Wiz in there, who was competent. He's not great, but he's competent, and the rest is history. But then last year, at the first sign of trouble, they gave the job back to Isaac. And Isaac is just a lot more athletic. I think he has improved dramatically. So I don't question he should be the starter. There's no question he's settled down and he's earned that spot now. But as far as being a backup, he could do a lot worse than Wisniewski because he can play all 3 positions, and generally there's not a sharp downgrade at any of them. But the Eagles are always looking for athletic offensive linemen. They're going to sign another one, the kid from Army. So that's what Jeff Stoutland wants, athletes, and that's not the strength of Wisniewski. He's more of a veteran guy who's smart, heady, he's played a lot of football, and he gets it done that way. He's not very athletic.
Yeah, I'm not saying put the guy in Canton or anything like that, but I just always feel like that's been a recurring narrative of, like, they know what they have in him, and they feel like, I just feel like he's underappreciated. A couple other guys on your Bears list for the Bulls and the Bears, and here's a guy, in Sidney Jones, John, a lot of expectations for him. I mean, like, when does the payoff come? And And as you write, maybe not yet.
No, well, I think Sydney's had a good camp, but I think people are jumping steps with him. I think it was a positive sign. I've said I don't understand. They've rotated each day throughout training camp with Sydney playing outside and then moving into the slot, and Avonte Maddox vice versa. Sydney's a natural outside corner. When you talk to him, he'll always say, well, I'm an outside corner, but when he has to play in the nickel. And I get the versatility part. You want guys to be able to do different things, so that's part of it. But the Eagles got to put him in left corner, leave him alone, and see if that talent develops. But I do think there's going to be some hiccups, and it's not going to be all peaches and cream. He's not going to be a superstar this year. And I think some people, as I said, are jumping steps and assuming because of some of the hype he had coming out of college that he's going to hit the ground and ultimately be one of the best corners in this league. I still think that position, corner as a whole, is one of the question marks on this team.
And then, of course, the one opponent that's unbeaten, John, Father Time. Is that sort of what the situation is with Orlando Scandrick right now? He's showing his age?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's not the player he was, and you saw that. I think he tore his ACL. It was either 2015 or maybe 2016. He was a really good corner in Dallas and hasn't been that same player since that injury. And it's kind of understandable at that position. And now he's post 30. I think, the Eagles only brought him in because Crevan LeBlanc got injured, and that's going to be into the regular season with a Liz Frank sprain in his foot. And that, to me, was more of a tip of the cap towards the championship window being open. So they got the best veteran slot corner that was still on the market that they could get. And I think at times Orlando Scandrick will help you. Because some of the similar things we just said about Wiz, veteran guys played a lot of football, knows how to play, but also at this stage of his career, he's going to get beat at times, and he's not the same player that once was.
He's the king of the Kangol. He's our Eagles 97.3 ESPN Insider. Kangol is those hats, Ryan, that you wear to protect your dome. John rocks a good one from time to time.
I thought you said cankles.
Kangol. Isn't that how you say the hat, John? Am I wrong? Is that
it? Yes, that's
is
the
it like
brand
a sun hat?
name. That's there's many. It's a driver's cap, but Kangol is a brand name. That's the most famous brand name.
Like Kleenex.
Maybe we'll have to get you one, Ryan. Not that I'm picking on your dome or anything like that. But John, you're going to be my guest tomorrow. Thankfully, I'm appreciative to have you on Saturday, and 9 o'clock is your time. I'm going to let you sleep in a little bit.
Yeah, I get to sleep in a little bit. No Eagles practice. It's been rough for me. I got to get up early every day. It's rough.
No activity yesterday, no activity today, no activity tomorrow. Sunday they get back to quote unquote work and we'll get into that tomorrow on the show. John, appreciate having you on. Thank you for being the one of the three of us that had to suffer through every single snap of that game last night.
And there was some suffering, trust me.
All right, Johnny, have a good one, man. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys.